want you to take a second and just look at that small, glowing rectangle you probably have sitting right within arm's reach right now.
Yeah, it's always right there, isn't it?
Always. And, we tend to think of our smartphones as just tools, like this highly advanced Swiss Army knife that holds your calendar, your messages, your maps.
Right, you think you're the one using it.
Exactly. But what if, from a purely psychological standpoint, it's actually using you?
That is the big question.
It is. And to understand why you really can't put that piece of glass down, why you feel a phantom buzz in your pocket, or why you reflexively open an app you just closed 3 seconds ago, we actually have to look at a highly controversial laboratory apparatus from the 1930s.
Which sounds crazy, but it's true.
So our mission today for this deep dive is to shift your perspective on that device. We want to take it from being this passive piece of metal on your desk to recognizing it as an actively engineered psychological environment. So, okay, let's unpack this. How do we connect a 1930s laboratory experiment to the smartphone?
It really is an incredible through line. I mean, when we analyze the modern digital experience, we are fundamentally talking about behavioral psychology. You just cannot separate the design of your social media feed from the work of B.F. Skinner.
Right, the famous, or maybe infamous, Skinner box.
Yeah, though fun fact, he actually hated the catchy name Skinner box that the media gave it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he strongly preferred the very rigid academic term, operant conditioning chamber. But whatever you call it, he designed this apparatus to study conditioning, essentially stripping away every single variable of the natural world so he could map the raw mechanics of learning and habit formation.
So let's talk about the physical setup of this thing, because it is crucial to understand. Just imagine being completely cut off from the world.
Utter isolation.
Right. You are placed in a highly specialized, completely soundproof box. There are no outside noises, no changing weather, no distractions whatsoever. The entire world just disappears.
And inside this very sterile environment, you only have a few very specific components to interact with.
Right, so if the subject is a rat, there's a metal lever sticking out of the wall.
Or if it's a pigeon, it's maybe like a translucent disc to peck at.
And interacting with that mechanism, the manipulandum, triggers consequences in the environment.
Right, exactly. So above the lever, you have stimulus lights. A green light might flash or a specific tone might play, and that signals that a condition is changed.
Like a cue.
Right. And then below the lever is the reinforcer, which is usually a mechanical chute that drops a food pellet, or maybe it dispenses a drop of water.
But there's another element too, and this is where it gets a little intense.
Yeah, the floor. The floor was often constructed from a metal grid that was capable of delivering a mild, continuous electric shock to the animal's feet.
Which brings us to the core breakthrough of why this matters to you and your phone. Because we aren't talking about Pavlovian bells and involuntary drooling here.
No, not at all.
Most people know classical conditioning, right? That's a biological reflex where an animal learns to associate two stimuli.
The bell rings, the dog drools.
Exactly. But Skinner was proving something entirely different. He showed that voluntary behavior is shaped by its consequences.
The animal actually has agency in this setup.
Right. It takes an action, and the environment responds. And that response basically dictates whether the animal will ever take that action again.
And Skinner identified 3 primary levers, mechanisms really, for shaping behavior. The most obvious one is positive reinforcement.
Which is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, the rat presses the lever, a food pellet drops. It's an additive process. You perform an action, you receive a biological reward.
So the nervous system logs that sequence.
Exactly. And the rat learns to press the lever whenever it's hungry.
Okay, so that's the first one. Then you have negative reinforcement, which, by the way, is constantly confused with punishment.
Oh, all the time. But it is fundamentally different.
Right, because negative reinforcement is the removal of an unpleasant stimulus. I always think of it like the snooze button on an aggressively loud morning alarm.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right, because when you reach over and smash that button, you aren't doing it to win a prize.
No, you just want the noise to stop.
Exactly. You are performing an action simply to make an awful, ear-piercing sound go away. Your behavior is reinforced because hitting the button brought relief.
And neurologically, that relief is a massive driver. So in the box, the researcher turns on that electrified floor grid. The rat is uncomfortable, it's scrambling around until it accidentally bumps the lever.
And the shock immediately stops.
Right. And it really doesn't take long for the rat to learn that the lever is basically the off switch for its discomfort.
Wow. And then the third mechanism is actual punishment.
Yes, where pressing the lever causes the shock, which teaches the rat to avoid the behavior altogether. But what's fascinating here is that these raw mechanisms of learning, they form the exact foundation for human behavior modification.
Even with all our complex thoughts and language.
Absolutely. Our nervous systems are still running on this same underlying software.
Okay, so getting a rat to press a lever for food when it's hungry, I mean, that makes total sense. It's just a transaction. The animal uses the lever as a tool, gets full, and walks away.
Right.
But the goal of modern tech platforms isn't transactional usage. It's maximum time on device.
They want you staying there.
Exactly. So how do you get the rat to ignore its own satiety? How do you get it to become utterly obsessed with the lever, pressing it until it physically collapses?
This is where it gets brilliant and a bit dark.
Yeah.
You introduce unpredictability.
Unpredictability.
Yeah. If the lever dispenses a pellet every single time, the brain maps the pattern perfectly. The novelty wears off, right? The environment is solved.
It gets boring.
Exactly. But if you change the algorithm so the lever dispenses food at random intervals, the entire neurochemical landscape of the subject just shifts.
And this is called a variable ratio schedule, right?
So maybe the rat presses the lever once and gets a pellet. Then it takes 10 empty presses, then 3, then 20.
So the rat never actually knows when the reward is coming. It just knows that it might come on the very next press.
And that word might is arguably the most powerful word in neuroscience. Unpredictability completely hijacks the dopamine system.
Because we usually think of dopamine as just the pleasure chemical, right?
Right, we misunderstand it constantly. It is actually the chemical of anticipation and motivation. Think about evolutionary biology. If our ancestors knew exactly where berry bush was, they didn't need a massive dopamine spike to go get it.
Because it's a sure thing.
Exactly. But foraging in uncertain territory, following a track that might lead to a hunt, or turning over a rock that might have bugs underneath it requires immense motivation.
So the dopamine hits before you even get the reward.
Yes, the spike happens before the reward, driving the animal forward through all that uncertainty. So when the reward schedule is variable, your dopamine stays chronically elevated.
Which perfectly explains the slot machine. I mean, the physical design of a slot machine is literally a human-sized operant conditioning chamber.
It really is.
You pull the physical lever, the stimulus lights flash, the tones play, and maybe, just maybe, you get a payout. That variable ratio is exactly what keeps gamblers pulling that handle at 4 in the morning.
Completely hooked.
But let me push back a little on how this maps to our digital lives. A casino makes sense to me because the reward is cold, hard cash, which equates to survival resources.
Right.
But social media is free. I'm not winning rent money from my feeds. So how does a variable schedule actually translate to a glowing piece of glass where the stakes seem virtually non-existent?
That's the key. We have to redefine what the human pellet actually is in this context.
Okay.
Money is just a modern proxy for survival. From a pure evolutionary standpoint, the human brain is absolutely desperate for 2 things: novel information and social validation.
Information and validation.
Yeah. Think about being in a hunter-gatherer tribe. Knowing the shifting dynamics of the landscape, like where a new water source is, or who is currently allied with whom, that was quite literally a matter of life and death.
Right. If you're out of the loop, you're in danger.
And furthermore, being approved of by the tribe meant you wouldn't be exiled and left to fend for yourself. So, to your nervous system today, a fresh piece of gossip, a novel fact, or a signal of social approval carries the exact same neurological weight as a calorie-dense piece of food.
Wow.
We forage for information exactly the same way animals forage for calories.
Which brings us right into the modern digital landscape. We basically take Skinner's entire blueprint, the isolation, the lever, the stimulus lights, the unpredictable pellets, and we overlay it directly onto the smartphone.
Welcome to the virtual Skinner box.
Right. And in this environment, you are the subject. The phone is the manipulandum. And the algorithm acts as this invisible croupier, constantly adjusting the odds and the reward schedule in real time based on your scrolling speed and eye tracking.
So let's break down the actual mechanics of this digital conditioning. You see the slot machine effect perfectly replicated in the infinite scroll of a feed.
Oh, for sure.
The vast majority of posts you swipe past are totally unremarkable. It's an ad, an acquaintance's mundane lunch photo, some repetitive meme. It's filler.
It's the empty presses of the rat's lever.
Exactly. But because of that variable ratio reinforcement, you don't put the phone down. Every few swipes, you hit a jackpot.
You find a hilarious video.
Or a really insightful article or a message from someone you actually care about. You have absolutely no idea when that next hit is coming, so your brain's anticipation circuitry just stays wide open, compelling you to swipe just one more time, over and over again.
And the physical gestures themselves are engineered to maximize this effect, aren't they? Like, look at the pull to refresh mechanic.
Well, that's a classic example.
When you're at the top of a feed, you physically drag your thumb downward to load new content. That tactile motion perfectly mirrors pulling a slot machine handle.
It does, and notice the brief, half-second loading animation that occurs when you do that. A little spinning wheel or a bouncing icon.
You know, I always assumed that was just the app communicating with the server. Like, it needed a second to load.
Not at all. Our cellular networks and servers are fast enough to load a text-based feed almost instantly.
Wait, really?
Yeah, that micropause is largely an engineered moment of tension. It builds the anticipatory dopamine spike. Your brain actually craves the resolution of that manufactured suspense, just waiting for the digital curtain to lift and reveal what new information has appeared.
That is wild. And then, of course, we have the quantifiable social pellets. Humans are biologically wired to seek approval, so platforms give us hearts, likes, view counts, follower metrics.
They literally digitize our social standing.
And they pair these rewards with Skinner's stimulus lights and tones, a bright red notification badge, a crisp, distinct pinging sound.
And over time, this is where classical conditioning actually merges with operant conditioning.
How so?
Well, you experience a rush of social validation when you see someone praised your photo, right? The app pairs that rush with a specific chime. Eventually, your brain associates the mere sound of the chime with the feeling of social belonging. A complete craving loop forms.
So you hear the chime from across the room,
and you feel a visceral physiological urge to cross the room, pick up the lever, and claim your pellet.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the positive reinforcement is only half the design. The negative reinforcement is where the mechanics get incredibly sophisticated and, honestly, a bit intense.
Yeah, the dark side of the grid.
Right. This is where FOMO, the fear of missing out, comes into play. Neurologically, social exclusion isn't just some abstract concept. Studies show that social pain, like the feeling of being left out, activates the anterior cingulate cortex.
Which is the exact same brain region that processes physical pain.
Exactly. And this maps perfectly back to the electrified floor grid in Skinner's box. The grid is the unpleasant stimulus.
So for a modern human, the electrified grid is the creeping anxiety of being out of the loop.
Yes. It's that subtle, painful dread that there's breaking news you don't know about, or a viral joke you won't understand, or a conversation happening in a group chat without you.
You aren't always opening your phone to feel a high.
Right. A massive percentage of screen time is driven by the desire to simply stop feeling anxious. By swiping open the app and verifying that you are caught up, you temporarily remove the anxiety of missing out.
The relief reinforces the habit.
You are the rat hitting the lever just to turn off the floor grid.
The realization that avoiding the pain of disconnection drives as much engagement as the pursuit of connection is profound. And the algorithms understand both of these variables perfectly.
They play both sides.
Exactly. They serve up positive social pellets while simultaneously leveraging the anxiety of the grid, oscillating between the two to maintain a state of continuous engagement.
Okay, so once you recognize that you are operating inside an environment calibrated by a century of behavioral science, the immediate question becomes, how do you dismantle the machinery?
How do you break the box?
Right, because you can't just rely on willpower. Relying on willpower against an invisible croupier that processes billions of data points a second is a losing battle.
It's totally unfair odds.
You have to intentionally alter the mechanics of the box itself. You have to introduce friction.
Friction is the key.
Yeah, because the entire tech industry is built on the philosophy of frictionless design, removing every possible barrier between you and the content. To reclaim your attention, you have to engineer intentional friction back into your life.
And the most immediate structural change you can make is silencing the box. Kill the pings.
Just turn them off.
Go into your system settings and disable all non-human notifications. If a flesh and blood human being is texting or calling you directly, the phone can make a sound. But the algorithmic environment itself should never be allowed to interrupt your physical reality, just to tell you that an acquaintance updated their status.
Right, when the stimulus lights go dark and the tones stop, you break the classical conditioning triggers. Another incredibly effective tactic is switching your phone's display to grayscale mode, which is usually buried deep in the accessibility settings somewhere.
This one is huge.
It is, because the digital pellets we receive are engineered to pop. bright, vibrant reds and blues. Our primate brains actually evolved in green jungles to spot ripe red fruit against the foliage.
So red signals urgency.
Urgency, energy, calorie-dense reward. By stripping the color away, those little red notification badges become a dull, depressing gray.
It fundamentally changes the user experience. You're stripping away the visual sugar. When the screen is black and white, the slot machine suddenly feels like a spreadsheet.
It really does.
The brain simply doesn't register the same anticipatory dopamine spike when looking at a monotone interface.
You also need to increase interaction friction. Like, we leave our most addictive apps right on the home screen, perfectly positioned for our thumbs.
Too easy to reach.
Right. Instead, move those apps to a hidden folder on the last page of your phone. Or, honestly, take the ultimate step. Delete the native apps entirely and force yourself to log into the platform through a mobile web browser.
And the reason this works isn't because the browser is less functional.
No, it works because it takes an extra 3 to 5 seconds to type in the URL and wait for the page to load. In neuroscience, that delay acts as a temporal buffer.
Just a slight pause.
Yeah, it provides just enough time for your prefrontal cortex, your logical, executive functioning brain, to boot up and override the automatic impulse of your lower brain.
You catch your hand hovering over the lever.
Exactly. And you have a moment to ask yourself, wait, why am I actually opening this right now?
Right.
Am I looking for something, or am I just avoiding a moment of boredom?
Timing is also a critical component of the box. The behavioral algorithms are most effective when your cognitive defenses are at their lowest, specifically the hour right before you sleep and the moment you wake up.
Which are the most dangerous times.
Yeah, during these windows, the brain is highly susceptible to variable rewards.
Which leads to the concept of the bedroom sanctuary. Keep the device in another room overnight. I find it deeply ironic, honestly, that the ultimate defense against a multi-billion-dollar algorithmic supercomputer designed by the world's smartest engineers is to go to a drugstore and buy a cheap $10 mechanical alarm clock.
It's beautifully simple. You're literally just putting a physical wall between yourself and the manipulandum.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it illustrates a vital shift in perception. Viewing the smartphone as a neutral tool leaves you highly vulnerable to its design. But recognizing it as an engineered psychological environment strips away its invisibility.
You realize what you're dealing with.
Exactly. You aren't weak for struggling to put it down. You're simply a human reacting normally to an environment perfectly calibrated to your biology. Recognizing the mechanics empowers you to dictate the terms of engagement, decide when or even if you want to play the game.
We have covered massive ground today. We journeyed from D.F. Skinner isolating animals in soundproof chambers in the 1930s to map the raw mechanics of learning straight into the algorithms orchestrating your digital life today.
Quite the trip.
We explored the anticipatory power of variable rewards, the manufactured tension of the pull to refresh, the digitized social pellets, and the FOMO floor grid that drives our negative reinforcement. But the ultimate takeaway is that once you see the bars of the cage, you can start building the friction necessary to step out of it.
I do want to leave you with a final thought to consider, though, as technology continues to accelerate.
Okay, what is it?
Everything we have discussed relies on algorithms serving up content from a pool of media that already exists.
Right, human-made posts.
Yes. An algorithm curates a funny video or an article to act as a variable reward. But if these standard curation algorithms can condition our behavior this effectively using mass-produced content, what happens when generative AI is fully integrated into the foundation of these platforms?
Oh, wow.
Imagine a system that doesn't just scour a database for a good pellet, but instantly generates the ultimate, perfectly personalized pellet in real time.
Just for you.
Yes. Media custom built second by second for your specific psychological profile, your nuanced fears, and your precise desires. Are we moving from a mass-produced Skinner box to a flawlessly custom-built one?
A custom-built cage generated in real time just for you. That is a sobering reality to prepare for.
It really is.
Remember, the goal of understanding all this isn't to throw your technology into the ocean. The goal is to continuously question the invisible systems operating around you. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Until next time, I hope you look at that glowing screen in your hand with a sharp new perspective. Keep an eye on the lever.